Welcome, everyone, to the Insurance Perspectives podcast. This is part two of our series on agency revolution. On today's show, we have Dave Morton
Hi, everybody.
and Jim King.
Hello, everyone.
If you missed part one in our series on agency revolution, I highly encourage you to go back and give it a listen to hear more from Dave. For part two, we're going to turn to our mutual customer who uses HawkSoft and Agency Revolution's Fuse and Forge products, which we integrate with both. And we're going to learn how Agency Revolution is used inside a real insurance agency. Jim King is General Manager of Waverley Insurance Agency in Belmont, Massachusetts. We're going to dive into the why of this, but just to give some upfront introductions, I've been getting to know Jim between takes and on the last episode. Compared to some of our prior guests, Jim is newer to the insurance world, which might surprise some people. He'll explain why in a moment. But he has over 20 years experience in the sales industry and working on things like high precision data instruments and aerospace, very complex sales operations that I think factor heavily into how he approaches Waverley Insurance Agency. This is really our first opportunity to speak and for me to get to know Jim. Jim has a very interesting origin story in the insurance space that, while unique to Waverley Insurance Agency, I think will also speak to situations and experience a lot of agency owners have as they think about the future or think about how they came into the space. So normally we would jump right into our customer questions, but I would love to take an opportunity and ask Jim, how did you go from aerospace to insurance?
Well, that's a great question and a great starting point. I had been in the aerospace industry for about 10 years, and I'd worked for a company that was headquartered in London. It was a $2.5 billion conglomerate, and I worked for a $700 million division. And one of the products that we manufactured was the equivalent of the check engine light for your automobile, but implemented on aircraft. I happened to be, because I was a U.S. citizen and the division was in Switzerland, I was tagged to work on the military side. So I worked on the engines for the F-22 fighter, the F-35 fighter, and the Sikorsky Black Hawk helicopter. In 2019, we experienced a death in the family. My brother passed away. And at that time, left me an insurance agency to run with 6 employees. So I stepped out of the aerospace industry and into the insurance industry as a neophyte, and trying to find my way through what the right things were to do or what the first right things were to do. The first thing I recognized is that our website was antiquated by almost any measure, probably 20 years old. So we set off in search of how to develop a new website and stumbled across Forge 3. At the same time, I was recognizing the need to be more social media conscious, be a little bit more proactive there because we had virtually no presence on any of the social media platforms, and engage with Agency Revolution. The fact that they merged a short time later was a great benefit to me, as I think I expressed earlier. So I was able to deal with one organization. But that's kind of the origin story, as you titled it, is how I got into the insurance business 5 years ago.
Wow, yeah. I appreciate you sharing that with us. I think, we were talking before we started rolling about perpetuation, which is a huge topic of concern for the industry. And I think, it is an aging industry. There is new talent coming in, but there was a period of time where folks weren't coming into an insurance. And I think it's a very respectful thing to take care of your brother's agency. I would love to know more about Waverley Insurance Agency. How long has it been in business in total? How many people are there? Do you specialize in personal and commercial lines? What does the agency look like?
So the agency was actually founded in 1953 by my father. And he didn't run it. He actually, there's a backstory to that, which is probably better told off of this program. but he had hired somebody to run it through the course of time. In the mid 80s, my brother stepped in and began running the agency. So we've been a long tenured agency. As a matter of fact, we just had a couple of people that retired last year that have been with us for 42 and 38 years, respectively. They
Wow.
were 78 and 72 years old. So that's kind of the culture of the organization, or speaks to the culture of the organization a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Our focus has primarily been in the personal line side. We benefited greatly from a location that allowed people to walk in and have a cup of coffee and stand and chat to some of the staff. It's kind of a old school way of doing things. So our business is about 80% personal lines as a consequence of that, and about 20%
Sure.
commercial lines, small business.
Okay. Now, you took on the responsibility of the agency and stepped up to help with the legacy of it. In those 5 years, have you found something about insurance that makes you excited about the industry?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that go on. One is I had underappreciated the complexity of the industry and the complexity and legal obligations that come with insurance policies. I had not truly appreciated how complex that part of the business is. The other thing that I see is a real exciting opportunity going forward is all of the mergers and acquisitions that are taking place.
Mm-hmm.
It's creating a tremendous void from a customer service standpoint, which is one of our strong suits. The example that I'll give you, and I think this is more broad-based than just the insurance industry. So I heard an advertisement for a credit card company, a well-known credit card company, about a week ago. And their point of differentiation that they were highlighting in their advertisement was the fact that their customer service team was US-based and spoke English.
Mm.
So I think that speaks to the experience that everybody has, a lack of customer service. And that's been our focal point. And I want to bring that back over to Agency Revolution and more specifically the Fuse platform. Because having a platform like Fuse that allows us to reach out to clients in a very automated way, nonetheless a very personal way, I think is a real advantage for us. We're able to send periodic emails to our clients to alert them to upcoming renewals. We allow, we're allowed to, the platform allows us to send birthday greetings rather. And it all comes from the individual customer service person. So when people get those emails from us, they actually call back or email back the specific individual, believing that it came from them. So it allows us to maintain that personal level of contact, but not burden our people with doing it on an hourly basis.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely think that is something that it's been a conversation for a while. Like, how do we? I think people take for granted quality customer service, and because when you encounter it, it does stand out. You touched on this a bit when you talked about stepping into the agency and seeing that got to kind of fix the website. But I'd love to know a bit more about what were you looking for when you first encountered. We'll start with Forge. Like, what were you looking for when you first encountered Forge? You knew the website needed work, but what type of solution were you seeking out when you encountered Forge?
Well, so some context there will help. We had already made the decision to change over our agency management system to HawkSoft. So one of the things that I was looking for with a website design and development company was somebody that could integrate to whatever degree possible with our agency management system. So that integration for me, for everything that I've done, has been an important characteristic, because if there's a strategic partnership, the communication between the strategic partners, to me, is so important. It means that I get a great experience and a great product to work with because of that interaction. So I was looking for something that was tied together. That was a main driver from my standpoint.
Gotcha. And then when you started to look, was that the same motivation as why Agency Revolution and their Fuse product stood out for the social media and the marketing side?
Exactly. exactly that. It was that strategic partnership. It went so well with Forge prior to the acquisition, obviously, that I was convinced that that was the only path that I was going to go down, was someone that had a strategic partnership with HawkSoft.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. One of the things that we're seeing with agencies and the challenges that they're facing is, an organization like Waverley Insurance has maybe 8 employees. Oftentimes, it requires 8 or 9 different vendors in order to run the business the way that they want. And so a big part of, I think, what HawkSoft's doing and what Agency Revolution's doing is trying to simplify that for the agency owner so that you have one place to go to execute your strategy.
Yeah, let me add something to that. We don't have enough resources internally to play around with a lot of that stuff. We've got to have it all seamless. We really do, and all interconnected. We don't have enough people to have them specialize in various market segments, or running a website, or running a marketing platform like Fuse. We don't have the internal resources to do that, nor the expertise.
Yeah. To pull on that string a little, how much of your background, you had a family history in insurance, but your background is probably more in some insurance itself, the sales side. I've definitely encountered some of the best salespeople I've ever known in the insurance space. But from my perspective, they're slightly old school, quote unquote, in their sales approach. Relationship driven, come in, have coffee, handshake, have those conversations. Was there anything you pulled from your background in trying to revolutionize, pun unintended, to revolutionize the Waverley Insurance approach to sales and marketing that maybe drove you towards some of the options you picked out?
I think it was. I'll start with, it was internally driven first, in that, and this goes back to HawkSoft, so it's not a direct answer to your question, and it leads to Agency Revolution ultimately. But we had been using one of the larger agency management systems that was outdated, and in my mind was soon to be replaced, or no longer supported. So we did a survey of the industry and settled on the folks internally settled on HawkSoft as the platform that they wanted to use. So once that decision was made by the team internally, the other decisions became a little bit easier, looking for, again, an integrated partner. So that's kind of how we came to Agency Revolution and Forge.
Gotcha. Okay. Fantastic. And I appreciate that you empowered the internal team to contribute to that. Not all people in your position do the same thing. So I think that's the right approach, because they're going to be in it just as much as you.
Well, I think it gives them the tool that they need, and this kind of speaks to the question you asked previously. It gives them the tool that they need to do their best job to service the clients that we have. And I think the proof of that has been that we regularly ask people for survey responses, and that feeds into our NPS score. And consistently, 99% of the time, we get 9s and 10s.
That's awesome.
So the infrastructure supports what the people are doing from a work standpoint, and that engagement with the clients.
Excellent. So you use 2 feature-rich platforms, Forge and Fuse. Forge for your website, Fuse for your client communication. And I know them fairly well, so I can definitely say that they do a lot. They are powerful tools. And with that means that there are a lot of tools in the toolbox. I would love to know, from your perspective, what can your agency do now with Fuse and Forge that you couldn't do before they were implemented?
So 2-part answer to that, and one is we reach out and touch clients much more frequently than we ever did, in a very proactive way. And I think the objective is somewhere between 9 and 12 times a year. So we're on a pace to do that for all of our clients, and we do it without consuming internal resources. So to me, that's a big plus. The other thing that we do, which I think is really important and has proven to be very beneficial, is we alert clients ahead of time when their policy is going to renew. It's important on the personal line side, but it's, I think, more important on the commercial line side, because many of our clients hold policies that are subject to audit. So giving them that heads up 60 days in advance, and again 30 days in advance, that, hey, your policy is about to renew, which means that your old policy is expiring. And by the way, if you hold a policy that's like this, you will be subject to audit. And then we list the types of things that they need to be prepared to present to the audit. So we try to give them that heads up, so that they're not caught off guard or they're not in scramble mode when that actually happens. And through Fuse, we're able to list the policies and the carriers on the email that we send them. So it all makes for a very nice package.
One of the things I love about what Jim is doing with his agency is we're talking about customer service, and customer service can sometimes be perceived as, I pick up the phone when somebody calls me, but taking it a step further and being proactive in your outreach is what Jim has decided to do with Waverley Insurance, and I think he's being rewarded with the high NPS scores because he sees that, as an insurance consumer or client, I want to know that the person looking over my policies is being attentive and making me aware of changes and things that are coming up. So
there's one other thing too that I'll add to that we do that might be helpful is within HawkSoft, we're able to set a threshold for premium increases. So that when a premium exceeds the threshold that we set, it automatically triggers our customer service folks to start shopping around. So rather than, ignoring it or not being sensitive to it, we're alerted to the fact that there's an extraordinarily high above market rates increase. Sure. And they start digging into it. So that's another proactive thing that we try to do on behalf of our clients.
I love that. And listeners, you can go to the HawkSoft. Normally don't say this because usually HawkSoft doesn't come up. But it's a sincere statement. HawkSoft customers that are listening to this, you can go to the help system and look up uprate alert, uprate, one word, and find a help article on that. And I wouldn't be surprised, David, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I imagine you guys leverage some of that as well, because you have insight into the policies. And as we discussed in part one, Lucas Jans, who's oversees product at Agents Revolution, very familiar with policy data and agency management systems. So it wouldn't surprise me if you guys had automation around that as well.
We do, yep. Yeah, you can trigger communications either externally or internally if a rate goes up by a certain percentage.
In part one, we gave Dave the opportunity to provide some constructive feedback to the insurance industry space. It was a very polite observation about change management and expectations, and you should go back and listen to part one to hear that conversation. Now the shoe's on the other foot. Jim is in the hot seat, and this podcast is a dialogue. Now, I'd like to bring up two things. The first is that I'm going to ask you, what could be different? Price is the boring answer. And obviously, I always say I wish we lived in this post-scarcity Star Trek world where price was of no concern and we just all had holodecks and whatnot. So we'll set price aside. The second thing I like to say is it is okay to pull HawkSoft into your answer. If there is something that we could be doing better in the context of this relationship, you are speaking to the person that is in that driver's seat. Well, I'm in the driver's seat in the sense of the toddler that gets to sit in the passenger seat with fake steering wheel. They let me pretend that I'm driving sometimes. Jim, what is one thing you would change about Agents Revolution if you could?
I don't know that I've got a real clear answer for that because I think they've done a really good job across the board for our experience. I'd be interested to know what other companies they might be contemplating acquiring Um, would be my answer. And the other thing I do want to touch on, and you said not to talk about price, so I won't talk about price. I think the conversation around that is better discussed as value rather than
Sure.
price. And I
Yeah.
think in both the cases, I feel very strongly that we get great value for the investments that we make, because
Mm-hmm.
investing in HawkSoft, investing in Agency Revolution are really investments in my agency. And I feel I get great value for that. So I think if one were to talk price, that's really the
Yeah.
conversation that one needs to have.
Gotcha. I'm gonna prise this a little. Um, is there something that you wish you could do right now in your marketing or sales efforts that you just don't feel that you have the time or the resources to do?
I wish there were a better way for us to understand why the social media part of our campaigns doesn't um,
Mm,
provide the response that we hope. We seem to
mm-hmm.
be shooting a lot of, that's probably not a good way to phrase it, but we are very active from a social media standpoint, but not getting the reactions uh,
Sure.
from the people that see our stuff that I wish we
Mm-hmm.
did. And that's probably the frustrating part, is it feels like we're doing an awful lot of work, but we're not getting anything in return. That would be the
Gotcha.
one thing I'd like to better understand why it doesn't work,
Yeah,
or it doesn't
absolutely.
work as I expected it would.
Yeah, so it's not maybe a technical thing, but more of just understanding the very fickle nature of social media and like maybe what maybe guidance on what could be done better, or
Yeah,
hey, if you had done this instead of that, maybe it would do
or
something.
more sharing of what works,
Sure.
or what we could be doing differently.
Gotcha.
Because you guys,
Huh.
the infrastructure is great, and I'm totally thrilled with that. It is, what kind of guidance could we get that would make us more
Yeah.
effective?
Gotcha. Okay. Um, Dave, throwing this over to you, is that something you hear from customers often? Like we're doing the steps, we're following the process, but the results, maybe we need to there's a misalignment on expectations, or what could we be doing better? I feel like I don't want to put you on the spot again because we interact a lot, and so I have a lot of memories about things. You guys have an account team that works with agencies, correct?
We do.
On this
Correct.
type of space. Um, so yeah, do you encounter this a lot, or have you heard this before?
Yeah, in particular around social media, and I think um, there's it's interesting with social media that like there's you have to be active, yes, but then you have to engage the community in something that's personal and that the community
Mm,
cares about. And oftentimes it's not, hey, you can bundle, an umbrella with your home and auto and save some money. That's not going to be the thing. It's going to be highlighting the personality of the agency and maybe
mm,
connecting to the broader community that you're trying to serve. And that's hard to replicate as a technology provider. It's hard to be in every single community. Our
mm,
One of our well-known faces at Agency Revolution is Joel Zwicker, and prior to him becoming an employee of Agency Revolution, he ran an agency, and he was really successful engaging his community on social media by engaging the local police and fire and
mm,
other other folks in the community that had influence, and creating some buzz around it that way, and use social media to create that buzz.
mm. Super interesting. Um, Jim, you also gave me the perfect segue into my last question, which is the same paired upswing from question 4. And you talked about how we shouldn't, if we're going to talk about price, we should really contextualize it as value, and that is exactly what my last question was about. So, how would you describe the value that Agency Revolution brings to your agency?
I think it's huge, because we've been able to retain the personal touch that we've been known for in the local community, and yet do it in a way that's automated so it doesn't consume the
Mm,
time of the internal staff. And the example that I'll
mm,
give you is, historically, at least on the commercial side, the folks there, anytime there was an upcoming renewal, 45, 60 days out, they're making phone calls, they're sending emails. 30 days out, they're making phone calls, sending emails. all time-consuming stuff. And we've been able to automate that, but it comes from them. And that's the important characteristic of all of this is it frees their time up to do much more productive, important things like checking coverages rather than crafting emails because somebody's renewal's coming up. So that is incredibly important from my standpoint and incredibly valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of takes away the tedium of executing on those steps and really gives them, they're professionals. They have years of experience in this very complicated space, and writing the same email for the 100th time manually probably is not the best use of that expertise. And so it sounds like Agents Revolution through Fuse gives you the ability to automate that process, free up their time, and then on the website side, put your best foot forward in presenting the agency to people who stumble across it or get recommended.
Yep, exactly right on both points.
Well, fantastic. Those are the questions I had for you, Jim. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your expertise and your perspective on this. Dave, thank you for joining us to contribute to the conversation throughout the way.
Thank you for watching today's episode. Click the video description below to learn more about our guests and to view the latest podcast episode as well as other content from HawkSoft. We appreciate you watching and hope you join us next time on the Insurance Perspectives podcast. Thank you.